Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, your guide to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, your cornucopia of PMP exam preparation tips. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. This is the fourth of 5 interviews about PMP exam coaching, and I'm welcoming Derek Satz, who also used the PMP exam coach. So we will be hearing about his trials and tribulations in preparing for this exam. It's a great lessons learned for everyone preparing for the exam. I learned during the interview that Derek has over 10 certifications behind his name, and I asked him for this introduction here why he thinks that the PMP exam is so difficult. So by way of introducing this interview, here is Derek's explanation of why the PMP exam is the most difficult exam that he has taken. It's a bit long, so please bear with me, but it's good and interesting. So here is what Derek said. As far as the PMP exam is concerned, it is so different than any of the other ones I took. Six Sigma was very hard, but it's mathematical, so you can't argue a wrong answer. There is always a right answer. Excel or Minitab does the work for you. You just need to know where you're going and understand what the numbers are indicating, and you'll get there. Where the quality section of the PMP ends, Six Sigma begins. With the PMP exam, there is a lot of how does the mechanism work, and that's what makes it so difficult. So I would have to say yes, in those regards, the PMP exam is the hardest of the 11 certifications that I took. It's not about being able to recognize the right answer. It's about being able to understand the question, even if the question is outside of the project management body of knowledge. What makes the PMP exam so difficult is that you can know what's in the book and still fail the exam. It doesn't matter if you know the material, you need to understand the material, which is why having a coach is so important, because they can tell you objectively whether you know or only understand the content. Otherwise, you could walk into the exam totally unprepared, even if you think you're ready. Beyond that, the PMP has such a large body of knowledge. So while, yes, the quality section was easier for me because of my Six Sigma certification, but the PMP is so different than all the other ones. It's way more time-consuming to get than any of the other certifications. And you have the possibility of more sticky points on this one than on any of the other ones. Since it takes so much time to get the certification, also, it's way easier to ask yourself, is this really worth it halfway through? I never had that experience with any of the other certifications. And it wasn't really until the last few weeks with the PMP exam when everything started to really click. The reason is that all the processes tie together. So if you understand all of the communication aspects, but you are weak, say, in human resources, then the communication actually really won't make sense because HR somehow ties into it, and you don't really understand HR, so it won't click. It really clicks when everything clicks. Again, very different than any of the other exams I took. Here's another way to compare it. The other exams were very much like anatomy, and the PMP exam is about physiology. At some point, you are going to have to be able to explain why an answer is the right answer. The others, you don't have to go to that point, or not at least in such detail. And that is why Derek Satz thinks that the PMP exam is the most difficult of the certifications that he took. No wonder that he decided to work with a coach. All right, after this long introduction, here is the interview. Hello, Derek. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. So, in hindsight, are you happy that you decided to work with a PMP exam prep coach?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the thing that it's not, in a sense, the ticket out per se. It's not going to be one of those things that just because of that you have this tool, you're going to pass it, but that's what it is. It's a tool, and it's a really valuable tool.
Okay, so you look at a PMP exam coach simply as a tool, like any other tool you would use to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's an essential in the tool bag of things that you need.
Sure. What was the reason that you decided to hire a coach and pay a coach?
Because the thing about it is that I've had, this isn't my first certification. I've actually have another 11 or 12 behind this. And
so wait, the letters in your certifications are longer than your name, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I have an alphabet soup behind me for sure.
Okay, so this is not your first rodeo.
Right, exactly. And one thing that I've just learned is that your time is really valuable, and you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what you should know, or you can kind of go to people and tools that they'll just kind of pave the way for you and say, you're wasting your time studying this too much. You already know it enough. You need to move on. Or, vice versa. You're really underdeveloped in this, and this is going to be a pretty heavy point on the test, and you should really look into this more. So having, that at your disposal, I think is really valuable. But, at the end, you're still going to have to study. I mean, that's the biggest thing you're going to have to put in the hours, and there's a lot of hours that you need to put in for the PMP exam. It's definitely out of the 11 or 12 that I've taken in the past, definitely the hardest for sure.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to studying, I assume studying happened during in between the coaching sessions, right? So you had a coaching session, then you studied, then you had another coaching session, you studied.
Right. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. So that was like the dynamic that I really did work on. Was it was one of those that, these are points that you need to work on. And then I go back, I check it out. I go and get up to the next point, look back at where we're at, and then, continue to move forward on that dimension where it's, check, go back, move forward, check, go back, move forward. And that's just kind of how it worked for me.
Yeah. And how did the coach, actually help you address your needs, your challenges, and ultimately help you become successful?
Well, my biggest thing about it was, I guess, just questions I had, and it would be on the lines of just knowing what type of questions would be coming up. I think that was probably the biggest thing with me, is that just knowing how the questions were going to be and what type of I gotcha questions were going to be out there, and the coach kind of helps you with that.
Okay, so for you, it was mostly what kind of questions will I be facing on the exam? And then the coach worked with you on those questions, presented them to you, you looked at them.
Right.
He gave you tips and tricks on how to, how
specifically
to read
with the math,
questions, answer them.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely, specifically with the math aspects of it. That was probably the biggest aspect of it. The thing about it, though, at the end is that a PMP exam is really kind of like a blind date in the sense of you'll get, a description of, she's tall, she's blonde, blah, blah, blah. And then when you get to the dinner table, you're like, well, I guess we had two different definitions of what tall and blonde looked like. And it was the same thing with going to the exam. I mean, you can get prepped up to a point of, what they're talking about once you see it, but until you're there, it's just really foreign. I don't know how to describe the PMP exam exactly, other than you can get coached to what the difficulty of the questions is going to be. And that's a really good litmus test. And that's what having a coach will actually, that's the tool that's really useful, is they can say, this isn't a hard question. You should be getting this correct.
Right. So let me just make sure. The coach identified your needs, first of all, and then worked with you on your specific needs, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So questions, math things. So did you actually review, how to work out these math questions?
Yeah, exactly. So there would be questions that we would end up going over of, specific, it was just workbook type questions, and then working through them over the phone and things of that nature. So you could actually go step by step and actually have things like that. I mean, for me, it was the math aspect that was kind of difficult for me up to the point that when I got it, it actually became the easiest part of the exam for me. And it was just because of drilling. I was actually really hoping that I was going to get a ton of questions on, quantitative stuff for the exam, just knowing all the different formulas and stuff like that, just because I was drilled so much that I figured that if it was going to come up, they were going to give me. So.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the coaching sessions. Let's begin with the basics. How did you arrange the schedule?
So with the schedule, my coach, he was really flexible in the schedule, and he understood that, I'm working full time, and this was something that I'm pursuing as I like to do, but I'm my own boss, so I don't have someone on me telling me, hey, I need to get this done within 3 weeks or within a month or whatever. I mean, essentially, I could have said, hey, I want to pass this exam in 2 years. What does our schedule look like? And he would have worked with me then. But I told him, hey, I want to go and pass this within a couple months. And what does a good schedule look like? And we just kind of went on a week-to-week basis on what worked for him and what worked for me. And then he was really accessible by email also. So if I was coming up with questions, he would address them then. But it was kind of on a week-to-week basis. And, I mean, he had an extremely flexible schedule and what he could do for me. So it worked out in that sense.
How long were the individual coaching sessions, the weekly coaching sessions?
So the coaching sessions, I believe it again kind of worked out to also, it wasn't, hey, this is going to take an hour or this is going to take 30 minutes. And if by the end of it, I'm still not getting it, it wasn't going to be one of those things like, hey, you're cut off, the time has been hit. It was really, if we, and, vice versa, if he had something scheduled out that was, hey, we're going to cover these topics. And I mean, I just crushed it within 5 minutes. He wasn't going to sit there and say, hey, I'm going to waste another 55 minutes of your time and we can go and keep on reviewing it. He would say, do you have any more questions? We can move ahead if you want to, or if you want to stay on the schedule, you can really just drill down on this and we can move forward next week. And
okay. So he suggested a topic for each of the sessions.
Exactly.
And then during the session, very flexible about, changing it and again, focusing on your needs and moving forward with what you need.
Yeah, exactly. It was really specifically on what I needed. And he kind of had a template of, this is what works for my past students. And we can go by this template, but it wasn't, it was very personalized in the fact that he understands that, or he understood that I'm not people are different and we're not stenciled. So, the sections on the PMP that are generally the hardest for other people is what he was saying. Those were actually my highest scoring sections. Vice versa, it was the sessions that were actually the easiest for most people. They were something I just had I had a really difficult time actually wrapping my head around. So with that said, he moved the schedule around on a week-to-week basis based off of that. He never had this approach of, this is how much time I spend. So
okay, so even though, statistically speaking, most people have problems with, let's say, probably risk, quality, and procurement.
Those were my best. Yeah.
Those were your best.
Yeah, those were my best.
But the more easy ones that most people, let's see, the easiest one is usually communication. Was that one of your?
Yeah, that was my worst.
Okay. So you're actually the other way around than most people. And your coach really focused in on the ones where you really had trouble. That's good.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that was, that was the aspect of it that I appreciated the most, was that he recognized that and then he tailored his coaching around that, and then also was available to answer questions with that. So.
Okay. So let's talk about the questions that's in between the sessions. So you would just fire off an email to him and say, hey, I have a question about X. Could you help me with that? And he would answer via email?
Yeah. So, really the biggest thing about it is also I know that he's a working professional and that, I'm not going to go and nag him about, single questions and things like that. It would really be, what's the focus of it? And I've understood that through my past taking of certifications, is that there's usually a common thread that you'll start seeing. If you're missing types of questions, then there's probably, a big piece of knowledge that you're missing. So I would end up taking practice exams actually through years, and I would end up seeing what's the type of questions that I'm missing, and asking, why is this? What am I not getting? And try to work it out with him with that. And then he would, say, you need to read up on this. Like, let's talk, let's do that. So it was using coach and then also using your materials. Those in couplet made such a strong foundation for knowing where you're at. And like I said in the beginning, it's really not one of those things that, like, I don't think that there's a magic potion. At the end, if you're not studying, a coach isn't going to do anything, and you can take practice exams all day long and just keep on failing. Right. You really do have to go in, read the book, study, digest it, think on it, meditate on it, and do it again over and over again. So
okay. So let me just make sure I got this straight. In between the sessions, you weren't sending him emails saying, explain the WBS to me, explain earned value to me, explain this to me. So it was more, you were looking for guidance, for more general guidance. If you had a specific question, it would probably be something that you would more take up in the next coaching session, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly. Because I mean, at the end of it, you want to make it worth the while with the questions. And also if I've just known from having my own work, if you're the type of person that's going to ask a question, 5 times in an hour, it starts to become desensitizing to your tutor or to the other person of being like, is this actually important? And I mean, you can go over questions when you're waiting for your next tutoring session. It would be more of a concern to me if I took a tutoring session, we just went over whatever section of it, of the PMP material, and now during the week I'm taking the practice exams, I'm reading the book, and I'm doing other practice exams from other books, and I keep on missing these questions, and I had it on Monday and now it's Wednesday and something isn't clicking. Like, you want to get that corrected pretty soon, because otherwise your next tutor session is just going to be an exact repeat of your next. So
yeah. So how much do you think you studied on your own between the sessions?
An insane. I mean, I've never actually studied this much before. It was like, I don't even know how to clock the hours for it, because there was different phases of it. I first started off with, what is it, Andy Crow, I think he has a book.
Yep.
And I started off with his. I moved to another book, and then, I was taking different practice exams with it and just gauging myself. And I was actually doing really fairly well with the practice exams. And I was telling my coach this in the time, and he was like, all right, well, let's take some big boy exams now. And then, he set me up with years, and all of a sudden, I mean, I just was bombing them. And he was like, no, like, it's because these other ones aren't accurate. Like, this is an accurate litmus test of where you're at. So in the beginning, I guess, rewinding a bit, it was a very passive, just try to learn it. And as you're getting closer and closer to the time that you're taking the exam, you start accelerating it. And you really don't want to plateau beforehand. I mean, you want to accelerate through the exam. So, I mean, towards the end, I mean, I took off a week, and it was just doing exams and just reading the book over and over again, just like, getting it down pat. Mm-hmm. And even with that, I mean, the exam was still difficult. It wasn't, oh, this is just a cakewalk. So, I mean, to give you even an estimate, I don't know. I took 2,000 questions from your website. Wow. Okay. And, or whatever the max was. I think it was like 1,900 or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I took the max of it. I mean, it was, and then there was other exams behind that, and I mean, there was a lot of time put into it.
So you put an enormous amount of effort into this, personal hours studying. What level of, how helpful was, how important was the coach in regards to your success?
I think it was, the most essential. I shouldn't say it was the most essential. It was coupled with other utensils. It's very, very essential. I think I don't think I could have done it really without them. Just for another, or if you did, I mean, there's plenty of people that do pass the PMP without a coach. What ends up being, though, is it takes much longer. And then also you might overstudy going into it and then completely mess yourself up once you're starting to take the exam, or understudy it. And so, I mean, to me, he was really useful. I mean, I don't see how I could have done it in the time frame that I did it without him. I think from start to finish, my testing with, from the time I said, hey, I want to do my PMP until the time that I actually took it, I think it was about like 2 or 3 months. So, I mean, he definitely set me on a program that was realistic with things and, helped me move along with it. So,
But what about the cost of this? Because, you're self-employed. You mentioned that you have your own company. Right. So you must have paid this out of pocket. Wasn't this, the expense, wasn't that hurting you?
I think my biggest thing about it was that the way that it's set up is, with the PMP exam, at least at the time that I took it, which was just this past year, is that you can take it 3 times and then, you have to wait a year. So in my mind, I would rather pay the money and make sure that I get out of there. It's an in and out job, and then you don't have to worry about it. And so the costs, the benefits outweighed the costs for sure. And it's one of those things that free advice to me is actually extremely dangerous. And having someone cost some money that's done it before has helped out hundreds, if not thousands, of students. pass the PMP, I mean, to me, that's a vital resource of, this guy's been there. He's got a gray beard now. You can trust him. So, I mean, that's what I like to have in my corner.
So you passed on your first attempt then?
So funny story
about that. Okay, let's go into that funny story.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually didn't.
Okay.
And the thing about it was that everything went wrong from the beginning of the day. I'm not a morning person at all, and I'm a night person. I was telling my coach this also before I took the exam. I was like, hey, I just want to get in there and take the exam. And he was like, I really wouldn't advise you taking it in the morning because, me and you are emailing each other at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, no, I can handle it. So I ended up scheduling it for the morning, and I didn't sleep that night because since I'm not a morning person, I was afraid that I was actually going to oversleep. So then I show up to the exam and haven't had coffee, essentially pulled an all-nighter, and I walk in, start taking the exam, and literally have no idea that I'm even taking a PMP exam. I had to look up to make sure that I was actually taking a PMP exam. I was like, I've never seen this stuff before. It really was one of those things that the lesson to be learned is when you actually take your practice exams, take your exam and the practice exams times. Because I didn't pass it. I almost passed it then, but I didn't pass it. I ended up coming home, and then I ended up calling him up, and I said, hey, look, this is what happened. And, he shot me straight. He was like, look, there's no reason why you shouldn't have passed it. I want you to just schedule the exam as soon as possible. Go to a different testing center, take it in the evening, and you'll pass it.
Right. So he told you don't take it in the morning because you're a night person. You went against his recommendation.
Exactly.
And boing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was the nerves were getting the best of me because it was something in my schedule at the time that I was like, I want to take it, before X date. And he was like, you're just coming up with unrealistic expectations of it. You're not a morning person. You should be taking it in the evening. Took it in the morning, failed it. I talked to him. He said, hey, schedule it as soon as you can. If they have a schedule thing for, within a few days, I would take it tomorrow if you can. There wasn't, so I had to wait until the following week. And I didn't really even study in between hands. And I took it in the evening, and I walked out of the exam in about an hour and 45 minutes, just aced it. So it was one of those things that was complete. And it wasn't one of those things that walking out of it, he was asking me, what were the type of questions? Maybe we can work through this. And I told him, I was like, I don't really even know how to answer that. I was like, this isn't anything too complicated. And it was, I think I was just tired. And that's really what it was. So, I mean, it wasn't one of those things. And I wasn't nervous going into the second exam. I knew that going into it, it just felt right as rain. I mean, I was studying in the evening all the time. I was doing my practice exam. So walking into the exam in the evening time, I mean, it was gold time. So.
Okay. All right. So let's wrap this up. What are your recommendations to our listeners who feel, I'm maybe struggling with my PMP exam preparation? What would you tell them?
So I would say first that, to be struggling with the PMP is probably really normal, and it's more abnormal to be getting it. I think the objective of the PMP, whoever writes the exam, is to keep you out of it. And truthfully, once you get it, you want to keep people out of it. So in the meantime, while you're trying to get into the club of having the PMP behind your name, seek really good advice, have a good coach. A coach for me was essential. They can tell you what you're doing wrong, how to maximize your time. Just like if you're working out, you don't want to be running for 5 hours if you can get the same, results done in 30 minutes. And it's the same exact thing. And then beyond that, just be perseverant through it all. I mean, the biggest thing with the exam is I think half of it is just a battle. I've never taken a 4-hour exam before. That was one of my biggest struggles, was just the endurance factor of it. So working up your endurance to the point where at the end you can sit 4 hours in an exam and not be freaking out, losing your concentration. With all that summed up, at the end you're going to have to study, and at the end you're probably going to have to make sacrifices in your social life. So make sure that you're square with that from the get-go, because it's going to be a rough road for a couple months, but once you're done with it, I mean, you're done with it. So it's completely worth it.
All right, perfect. Derek, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
And that's it for our interview with Derek Satz. As a reminder, to learn more about our PMP exam coaching program, please go to pmprepcast.com/coaching. Until next time.